are willing to participate in some tests when we need them. So we've sent out, for this particular occasion, we've sent out a questionnaire just asking them to use the new website. We haven't had a chance to do that yet. So we've never actually tested the live version of the new website in its entirety, right? So we've just said, all right, let's try to do that and get some feedback where we might use some of that feedback to kind of prioritize some of the upcoming work streams. So we've had about 80 responses. So that was yesterday. As of yesterday, it's quite an engaged user group. So about 3/4 of them have seen the new website before. So they are, sort of more regular users, and about 1/4 of them actually use the website every week. And to summarize some of the feedback, right? So we've just asked some of the basic questions, but some of the main questions were really like open questions. So how, what kind of things do you find difficult to use? What kind of things do you really like? That kind of stuff. So moving on to the next slide, we can see that a lot of the feedback was actually quite positive. Mostly that's related to kind of the simplicity of the website and kind of the ease of navigation. So, quite a lot of people have said that it's like easy to browse, it's clearer than the old site, it's like, the navigation is quite easy. There is an understanding that the website looks kind of like the Gov.uk pages, which is intentional because we have used a lot of the design patterns from the Gov.uk websites. And, there have been comments from people saying that they actually like that because, they kind of like the clarity and ease of use of the Gov.uk websites. Moving on. We do acknowledge, though, that, and we have seen from the comments that there is still work to be done, right? So, for example, one of the things that we've heard before is that there is quite a lot of text on the current homepage. So maybe there's a way we could make that slightly less overwhelming. While, there is a lot of text, people still kind of find the things generally quite easily, but they do, in some cases, have made comments that, it's a bit of a kind of wall of text, really, right, when you first come on that page. So there may be something we can do about that. Moving on, some users get confused when navigating from the new website to the old websites, right? So that's something that was quite expected, and we've done a lot of work to actually make this a little bit easier and better. So we have a kind of structured approach to saying when you come to a local area website like the Aylesbury Vale or the Wickham area, there are clear patterns to kind of guide people from that website back to the new one, and vice versa. But in some cases, it's just, it's very difficult to understand sometimes that a lot of this content will gradually get moved across. It's just not happened yet because there is so much of it, right? So some people have made comments along the lines of that they're a bit confused why they go to these local area websites where that they're expecting them to be kind of transferred to the new layout. And on top of that, there is also the old domain, the Buckcc domain, where a lot of the content is still hosted. Now, that has actually been made to look exactly like the new website, but sometimes people still see that it's a different domain, and that gets a bit confusing. So that's something for us to think about. Not sure if we can do much about that other than just transfer all the content, but maybe we can provide at least some clear guidance on why that is so. Next one. One thing that I'm quite keen on trying to tackle a little bit is the search, right? So the search currently works only across the new pages, which is intentional, but also brings with it certain problems where a lot of the content that is still not on the new website, sometimes that results in a search that doesn't have any results. So and then that sometimes ends up being kind of like a dead end in a way, so people don't really know what to do after they've searched and then they just don't find anything. So we can provide maybe some guidance about what they can do when they don't find the results. But also having that, having those results coming up where nothing is found actually helps us to understand which of the areas we can then transfer, or which of the areas that are missing currently we kind of need a bit more focus to transfer first to the new site. Next one. There were a few comments, and I think that's partly because the group that we were testing with is quite an engaged group, But clearly, people are quite interested in what's happening with the new council, right? So they're trying to find information about, for example, who their councillors are currently. They're trying to find the name of the more senior people in the council, and some of that information is currently still on the Shadow website, and we're kind of working to transfer some of that over. But that's something, again, as an indication that it's something people are looking for. Next one. Oh, and that's it for the user feedback, right? So these were just some of the most, I guess, common comments that people have made. So there's a number of others that are quite, specific maybe to specific users. But these 5 areas kind of give us a good sense of where we might want to focus next, at least for the next few weeks. And one of the things that we have been working on in this last sprint is specifically aimed at presenting information about policies and various council strategies in a more accessible way. So we have been working on designing that kind of content in a more accessible way. So one of the things that we have been doing is working on a template that we could, so on a slightly different template that we don't currently have in our CMS, that we could use to publish such content as a sort of self-contained publication, but still in an accessible HTML format, right? So one of the problems that we had on the old website was that a lot of those documents were published as PDFs, which makes it quite difficult for people to read through, partly because they need to download them separately, but also they are not particularly accessible. So for people that have specific needs, like people that are using screen readers, for example, often find those documents difficult to read. So if we can publish all of that in an easy to access HTML format, that will enable more people to be able to read those documents. So that's always a desired thing. And we are also at the same time thinking about how we can change perhaps the entire process of how those documents are created, right? So we're thinking about everything from, who are the people involved in writing those documents and maybe providing some training, etc. For that, and also like tying that all the way down to the web team that's actually publishing those documents. So how can we make sure that whole process is supported in a way that enables the documents to be written in the right way? And one of the things that we have done in that respect is just earlier today, we had a workshop with a number of people from the policy team, as well as some other stakeholders. So we had some people from the service teams that have been involved in creating policy documents. We had a few graphic designers that have been involved in, for example, designing the PDFs, for the documents that are a bit more elaborate, and a few other stakeholders. So we had quite a large team of people in the workshop just discussing how can we support this whole process better, how can we work more collaboratively to make these documents more accessible, and what are some of the challenges involved. And also how can we, what kind of support can we provide, right? So we were talking about things like training, we were talking about things like just demoing what it looks like on our side when you publish those documents on the web, right? Just understanding how that works makes it a lot easier for someone writing that document to write it in a better way. So there are a lot of ideas that came out of that workshop. It was really productive. Quite a challenge, to be honest, to conduct the workshop online. So that was a bit of an experiment for us. But nonetheless, it was really productive, and we're quite eager to go through all the stuff that came out of it and, again, use that to prioritize our work for the next sprint. And with all that in mind, I think I can now pass over to Jane, who is going to talk a bit about accessibility.
Yes, thank you, Boris. So nicely leading into the accessibility improvements, which we've started working on over the last sprint. We completed an internal audit for accessibility last week, which we completed using a few different automated tests, but also manually just going through with the screen reader and checking some key pages and templates. And this resulted in this Trello board, which you can see here on the screenshot. We have lots of cards which we've been working through over the last couple of weeks, and we've made some really good progress in making improvements here. For most people who sighted users on a website won't necessarily know or particularly care how a website is put together and the code side of things. But for users who rely on screen readers, the opposite is true. Screen readers rely heavily on the markup of a page to read aloud which section a user is interacting with at any time. So it's really important that we make these changes and make sure that everything is tightened up and as efficient as possible for screen reader users in particular. So as a result, a lot of the changes that we have been making are sort of under the hood, so to speak. So I don't really have any visual demos to show today, but I just thought I'd give a generic overview of what sort of changes we've been making. As you can see here, we have some color contrast, which Boris put together, and this includes all of the Buck's colors and the levels of color contrast accessibility levels, I suppose, that they hit for each background color. So it allows us to kind of quickly review which colors we can use on which backgrounds and make sure that they hit a certain level of accessibility. And I think we are aiming for AAA where possible, but I know that there are some areas where we accept a AA standard if it means that the meaning of that color is conveyed more effectively using a slightly less contrasting color. So yeah, so there isn't a huge amount to demo in terms of this, but it's just it's a really good part of the project that we've started getting stuck into, and I'm really hopeful that when we have the audit on the website at the beginning of May, we will get some really good feedback on those improvements. So the next thing that I will be demoing is some front-end changes that we've made in the last sprint as well. So I'm just going to try and take over your screen, Ben, see if this works. I just need to give it permission. So let's see if this works. Oh, it looks like I need to quit Teams and start again to share my screen for some reason. Okay, let me just have a quick see if I can get this working without quitting. Apologies about this, folks. Is that going to work? No, I think what might be best.
Yeah, we can see now.
I hand over back.
Dave, we've got it. We've got you.
Oh. The disclosure request now. Perfect. Okay, that's excellent. So this is one I prepared earlier. This is a disclosure request on the staging site. This isn't yet live, but this will hopefully be going live in the next few days, if not this afternoon. So I've just filled this in with a load of test data for the moment, but you can see at the bottom here, we've been working on this new field, the attachments field here. It doesn't look super wonderful right now. We do have a little bit of UX, hopefully, to improve on this in the next sprint potentially. But I'm just going to demo how this works. So you can select either a single file like that, or you can also highlight a few different files, and it will show you that you've got a few files selected. As you can see, the UX here is not amazing. We do need to work a little bit on this to make sure that people know exactly what files they have selected on the form. But as I said, that will hopefully come with the next sprint. And then another improvement we've also been working on is to fix double submissions and multiple submissions. So sometimes if users have a slow internet connection, particularly, they might accidentally or purposefully select send. But as you can see here, the send button is now being disabled on the first submit more than once now. Oh, and we have some errors. Awesome. So you can see the errors are actually working, which is great. I've chosen an incorrect file. So as you can see, the errors are working wonderfully. So let's just try this one. And when we come to, if I can get a Oh, okay. Hang on. So as you can see, folks, the validation that we've added to these forms is obviously grab another Okay, hopefully third time lucky. We'll get to the confirmation page. Okay, wonderful. So here you can see as well, this is the confirmation page that we've been working on for the Aptian forms. And we've got this nice alert component, which we've been improving the look of over the last sprint as well. This also follows the Gov UK design pattern for the alert component as well. And then we've got some extra information underneath, but this feels a lot more sort of in line with a confirmation page than we had before, which I believe was just plain text. So we've got a little bit more information about your application that's been submitted here. I think that was all I had to demo today that was new. I think, oh yeah, sorry. So there's just one more that I have open, which is a little bit of a refinement or improvement to the filters for the jobs section. So we've recently just deployed the new filters here. As you can see, we've got these lovely accordion features. But one thing that we wanted to improve is that when the accordion was shut, if you had any of these selected, you weren't able to see how many of these were selected. So we've added now an automatically updating counter so that you can see exactly when this is closed. You can see how many select boxes you've selected, which is really helpful. And we've also added a reset filters here, so you can see once you've selected that, it will remove all the filters. So this is not yet live, this is also on staging, but hopefully this will be going live with our next deployment, which will either be this week or the following week. I think that is it from me. I will hand over to Ben, I think.
That's great. Thank you so much, Boris and Jane. Yeah, just the last couple of little bits to go through with you, and then we will have a few minutes for questions if people have anything they want to ask. Think about them now. Analytics. A really important component, I guess, of how we learn about how people use the website and use the services within it. So we do lots of qualitative research where we talk to people and we show them things, we get them to interact with things, and we understand kind of why they expect things to happen and how they use things. The analytics is what gives us the raw data. So this tells us the number of people looking at different pages and can do things like telling us how people kind of move through the website. So we started, those of you who have been kind of joining us regularly will know, we started with a very minimalist analytics platform. So we wanted to, I guess, justify any kind of collection of data that we were doing, particularly large scale information about users that has some potentially kind of personal information in there. And so we started with the smallest possible version of that. So we went with a very privacy-aware service called Fathom that didn't collect any personal data at all. So it only gave us aggregate information about how people were using the site. And from that, we've been able to kind of learn a few things in this first month of having a live service. So we can see how many people have kind of visited the website and the number of pages they've viewed, the kind of some of the standard metrics. We also know a bit about what pages people are actually visiting and reading. So won't be a surprise to you, but coronavirus pages, so the kind of coronavirus section is one of the most popular, along with stuff to do with service changes. So we've got lots of people checking quite regularly to see how our services are being affected by the current crisis. And business support, really popular, busy section. So we've done lots of very kind of positive and proactive comms about how local businesses can access support and some of the funding support available. So that's been something that we've seen quite a bit of traffic to as well. Waste and recycling, unsurprisingly, that's always one of the top pages, I think, at any time. So people are still coming along and finding those. And also the video updates. So video updates from the leader and the chief executive have proved really popular. We've got lots of people coming along to those and obviously watching the kind of videos and catching up on the kind of current status and how the local authority is working with partners to respond. And it also tells us a little bit, and only a little bit, about some of the devices people use. So we've got some information that can tell us, for example, more than 50% of our users are on either a mobile or tablet device. And it's actually likely to be quite a lot more than that. So at the moment, we're not filtering out staff who might be visiting the website. So something we'll look to do in the future is obviously filter some of those numbers out, so we get a slightly cleaner view of just kind of resident users. And we would expect that to kind of shift that metric even further along. So designing for mobile, doing a lot of the work that we've been talking about making things readable and accessible, become even more important when we think that a lot of people, the majority of our users, are actually trying to interact with this on a very small screen. So the reality is we do need more data. So we said we would try to, we'd justify at every step the kind of collection of any more information. I think we've reached that step. There are some spots we're a little bit blind to, and we need more information to help us with the way that we design. So we're going to be moving towards the kind of industry standard, really, the Google Analytics platform. We're going to do some work before we plug it in to make sure that we're setting it up in the most kind of privacy focused way. So we're going to switch off some of the demographics tracking and some of the more aggressive harvesting of personal data and kind of user behavior, and just trim it right back to only those bits of data that we know we need and that we know we need to help us design services. This does also mean we've got to make some changes. So unfortunately, we're going to have to introduce a cookie banner. I know they're all over the internet and people are perfectly used to these. I really don't like them. They're kind of obnoxious, and they're the first thing everybody sees on every website anywhere they go. But there's not really at the moment any better way of getting around the fact that we need people to give consent to having their data tracked. So the behavior here will be that when people land on our website, we won't be tracking any data about how they use it until they've made a positive kind of acceptance, or they've given consent in a positive way by clicking this big green button here. And that does have an implication for the data we see. I've had a chat with some colleagues in other local authorities, and they've seen quite a big drop off in terms of their number of users as recorded by the analytics, because some people will either choose not to accept this, or they'll just ignore it and kind of browse through the website, and so you won't be capturing those data for people. That's how we have to operate under GDPR. That's the way that we'll be setting this up. So before we plug the new analytics platform in, we need to make sure that we've got all of our kind of cookie controls in place, and that we've updated our cookie statement and some of our privacy information too. So finally, next steps. So some of the things we're thinking about at the moment. Here's where we are on the timeline. So we're kind of hopefully coming towards the end of the specific focus on some of the technical and design debt. That's an ongoing thing. There's always a need to make sure that we're keeping on top of this, but we can start looking ahead to some of the more kind of developmental things, like Boris mentioned, some of the policy pages, and Jane talked through a lot of the accessibility improvements. We're also looking at something called schema.org. So this is about there are some smart things we can do to structure the way we publish onto the web, so that it's more findable. It's particularly good for helping people find things in Google, and it can help Google do some slightly more interesting things with search results too. So we're going to look at where the most appropriate places to bring some of this in might be. We're also doing some work with the Family Information Service. They're going through a bit of a redesign and a transformation of the service that they offer. So part of that means moving some of the information that currently sits on a separate website back into the kind of main corporate content management system. So we're working with that team to get them ready to be responsible for some of the content on the website and to work with them. They have content designers in their team, so they're used to working in similar ways to us. So we just need to work through how we're going to kind of become part of a slightly bigger community of people who publish things to the web. And then we've got some bits of research we need to look at, and some technical discoveries on some problems we know we need to have a think about. So for example, we quite often have to record the status of schools, particularly in the winter. Now, I know lots of schools aren't open at the moment, but this is particularly an issue for when the snow comes. We need schools to be able to quickly update whether they are or are not open in different bits of the county. This is a service we've always had on the website, on the county website. Now's probably a good time to be building it because it's hopefully not going to snow for a little while. And we're still going through how we look after and keep up to date on some of our older websites too. As Boris mentioned, it's going to take a while to move a lot of the content over. So that means we need to keep our existing kind of web estate up to date so that residents can get access to the services they need. So next show and tell, I've sent out an invite for those. It's at the moment it's penciled in for the 14th of May. We're just having a little think about possibly moving to a kind of 3 weekly schedule. If we do that, I will update the invite and send that out. So finally, if there are any questions, now's the time to kind of jump off mute and shout out, or you can ask in the chat window. Otherwise, it's you can catch up with us another time. So we'll hang on for a few minutes just in case anyone wants to ask anything.
I had a quick question, Ben. Well, I'm guessing you're not going to like it, but what's your opinion of cookies, the cookie permission that breaks it down by categories? So essential cookies, marketing cookies for marketing, etc. Because there was a blog post on the gov.uk best practice, and it was exploring that, but it can massively take up the first page just with the list of cookies.
Yeah, it's a good question, Ryan. So at the moment, we're only looking to introduce a couple of types of cookie, to be honest. So there are some essential ones that have to be there for the site to work and for the site to be secure. So those are ones that people can't opt out of, and that's fine under the kind of ICO and GDPR rules. And then we're going to have some quite simple kind of tracking cookies. And so that effectively is what that green button's about. There will be some information about how people can manage their cookie controls. So there'll be, the ability to, if they've consented before but they want to effectively unconsent to it, there'll be ways of explaining that to people. If a need grows to, if we do start using lots of other types of cookie for lots of different reasons, then we'll need to look at adding more complexity in, which would be the kind of, the sliding sidebar you might see on some websites that give you the ability to toggle certain types of cookie on and off. At the moment, we don't need it, but we don't know what the future of the website is yet. So if we get to that point, we'll have another think and we'll look at that design and we'll kind of iterate it appropriately.
Ben, sorry, it's Liz Connick. I'm just saying, are you looking at when content is updated for people to subscribe to updates? For example, with the waste, you said ticks are possible. Like in the current situation, the ticks are closed, so people will, if they subscribe to an update, it'll automatically be informed when they're opened.
Good question. That's not something we've got and not something we've particularly thought about at the moment. One thing we are going to start exploring is this concept of a kind of a status of something. So, is it open or closed at a particular time, or is there some kind of special status that's been applied? So as you say, so now we've closed things because of coronavirus. So when we start to kind of explore that, we'll look at some of those potential use cases and find out what's most useful for residents. I don't know the extent to which people really subscribe to individual pages. I'm not a behaviour I see a lot, but then I've not done a ton of research into that. So we'd want to understand, what the reason for doing it is, who it's going to help, whether it's an effective way to build something before we would introduce anything like that. But yeah, we should start exploring, as I say, that concept probably around schools first, just because we've got a bit of space to think about how we design that properly. Okay, so I don't know if there are any more questions. Now's your last time to shout. Otherwise, we'll say thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again in 2 or 3 weeks. The invite will be in your calendars, and feel free to invite anyone else who you think might be interested as well.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Thank you.